the concept of the periodic table, the way the periodic table conventionally is addressed, do they address these things as being isolated or intertwined?
They interact, but they feel that carbon will always be carbon, and it will have its half-life and keep breaking down, but it still be carbon. They don't understand that it unwinds and becomes nitrogen. Nitrogen unwinds and becomes oxygen.
So the periodic table, that the conventional use of the periodic table, and what is this other gentleman's name again?
Walter Russel.
Walter Russel. Walter Russell's version of the periodic table. How is Walter Russell's version of the periodic table perceived by people who study this?
Well, now everyone wants to use it. My intention was to rebuild the periodic table, and I was going to spend 40 years rebuilding the periodic table, and I found out that Walter Russel had already did that. And he did it based upon the natural curvature of everything. The periodic table they have now, you'll see hydrogen sitting all the way over there by itself, but they don't show that hydrogen has the same tone as carbon.
What do you mean by tone?
Same key of E, 40.5 hertz. The next one would be like 81 hertz. You go to silicon, it will double up and would be 162 hertz. You'll go to cobalt, and it'll be 324 hertz. It's, in that base, if you were to take the angles of incidence or the tones that they create, their color, like you can turn color back into sound based upon, it's the same wavelength, it's just twice as long or much longer. So all you have to do is keep dividing light by 2.
Keep that up, Jamie.
You keep dividing light by 2, and you'll ultimately get back to the audible sound of it, because there was a relationship between light and color, sound and tone, matter and shape.
Instruments made of wood, string, and metal move in complex and nonlinear ways, and that's partly why the sounds they make are so rich.
With a frequency of 176 pulses per second. Sounds like this.
Now you compare Walter Russell's periodic table that he put together to Mendeleev's periodic table, and you'll see something completely different. It's unwinding.
Whoa.
You'll see there's a relationship between hydrogen, carbon, silicon, cobalt, rhodium. They're all bonded. They all sit as the middle point between two noble gases. So those things don't really exist. It's only one substance. Now the problem is, the first thing that we're able to perceive is hydrogen, because before it is too dense for us to perceive it. You understand what I'm saying?
Okay.
As you reach into the next octave, the carbon octave, and they call that a bisexual tone, because the carbon has 2 tones to it. It has a negative side and a positive side. The part where lithium behaves, lithium is contractive. Beryllium is contractive. Boron is contractive, but the moment you get to carbon, you balance it out. It gets to a perfect balance of plus and minus 4. So it's a double tone. Then nitrogen is minus 3.1, minus 3, oxygen is minus 2, fluorine is minus 1. Now the balance of this, all of those are mates. Fluorine and lithium naturally mate. If you have lithium bonded with any other element, the moment that fluorine is introduced, it will break all bonds violently so it can bond with fluorine. Same thing with beryllium and oxygen. That's why it said, and what they've tried to keep from us, if you want to break water into its component parts of hydrogen and oxygen, all you have to do is introduce beryllium or the sound of beryllium. And oxygen will violently break away from any other thing, even hydrogen, to bond with that beryllium. And now you can have it just with the frequency of it. And since the hydrogen is smaller, hydrogen will, that waveform, you can send that up into one tube, the oxygen into another tube, without using electrolysis, without using heat. It was just through frequency, and the proof of it, if you go back up just a little bit higher, we know the relationship between sodium and chlorine. They're equal and opposite mates. If you get out of the pool and you got chlorine and you're itching from the chlorine, all you have to do is get some real salt and rub that on your skin, and it'll turn right into an oil. It naturally neutralizes each other. So everything has an equal and opposite mate. The lithium becomes sodium in the next octave, doubles the same exact tone, just doubled and wider. The sodium becomes potassium in the next octave, widens up. The reason that arsenic kills us is because our DNA has nitrogen and it has phosphorus in it, because nitrogen unwinds into the next octave right after silicon and becomes phosphorus. Our DNA has both of those in there, but it's going by tone. So the moment arsenic, which sits as a -3 on the next octave, the moment arsenic is introduced, the body thinks that, oh, this is my thing that I need. And it tries to wrap itself around the arsenic, but it causes the DNA to unravel because it's 4 times as large as that nitrogen was. And those other little elements, titanium, vanadium, chromium, manganese, and iron, all of those aren't true elements. Those are isotopes. Those things, those first 3 are the full tones. They make full spheres. But now it becomes elliptical with titanium, vanadium, and chromium. And on the other side, it's like when, like I said, if you wrap the rag around your hand, the first wrap, really tight. You can't get much out of it. Second wrap, you damn near can't see the difference of it. Third one, you start seeing hydrogen. The fourth wrap, you see carbon. I need a piece of paper or a rag, and I can show you that twist. But in between each one of them, by the time you get, nature does not allow us in the silicon octave for there to expand out. But there is the same titanium, vanadium, chromium, manganese, and iron that exists between aluminum and silicon. But nature doesn't allow us to unravel that. But now with the wave conjugations, we can. We couldn't do that before because we didn't know the angles of incidence that were necessary to open these things up. And you couldn't do that with the platonic solids because the platonic solids were averages and approximations. They, like I've said a number of times, you show me a real straight line in nature. If everything in the universe, everything is expressed in motion, all motion expressed in waves, all waves were curved. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So the greater the action, the greater the reaction. The greater the reaction, the greater the resistance. The greater the resistance, the greater the curvature. Because the universe is based off of equanimity, which Einstein left out in his theory of relativity, the balancing side of the gravity was caused by electric force. Electricity is always seeking a higher pressure condition. It spins northeast, is trying to get to the center of an area, the center of a cone. But the next electric wave is coming, so it gets pushed out, and as it's pushed out, it gets to the vortices. And that's on those pieces, those vortices. Now, instead of it spinning northeasternly, centripetally, it's forced to spin centrifugally, and it spins southwesternly. And it expands itself out, it decays, it keeps decaying until you get 4 magnetic waves that hit each other at 120-degree angles. At that point, they reconvert back into the electric field, and then they make their way back to their source again. whether it's the star, whatever star it came into. What happens when we get older? We expand at our equator, right? We get shorter at the top. Why? Because the electric force is pushing in and condensing, and the magnetism expands out at the equator. The electron field, the electrons, that's just discharged electricity, devitalized electricity coming from the sun, coming from the earth. It's the waste product from it. But it hits our magnetic field, and then it gets pulled right back in and gets compressed again, and now it becomes electricity for the earth, and then it pushes itself right back out again at the equator. The equator is 5 miles wider than the poles. Electricity, Einstein left that out of his equation because he coupled electricity and magnetism together and didn't realize that electricity was the equal and opposite of magnetism. Electricity being the contractive field. You breathe in, that's a contractive thing. You breathe out, that's a magnetic thing, a radiative thing. But they use the term magnet as an attractor. But to magnify something means to what? Make it larger, increase the space. That's the work of radiation. That's what Walter Russel was talking about all those years. That's the work of radiation. It's the electricity between the things that pull them together. The Coulomb force that supposedly opposites attract and push each other away. If that was true, then hot air and cold air would seek each other out. They're the same substance, but just but in a different state. They move in opposite directions from each other. Hot water and cold water move in opposite directions from each other. The reason two magnets seem like the North Pole is attracted to the South Pole, because if you had two rivers or two hoses with water coming out of them, and you pointed them at each other, what are they going to do? They're going to be pushing against each other. But they align to where the male enters the female and is able to come out. So they've been fooled by their senses. They've been fooled by their eyes and have missed the whole picture of it. So we've been fooled by our senses. Our eyes see 0.05% of the entire electromagnetic wave. We're blind cosmically, but we judge everything by what we see. And they've done that with science for so many years. You look at E = mc squared. That talks about expansion. It does not show how it's divided. You've never breathed in twice without breathing out. You breathe in and you breathe out. You charge and you discharge. So how is it that the breathing in, they're acting as if the universe is just expanding out, breathing out, and it's going to dissipate out, and they never include the contractive side of it, breathing in, because they were misled by Newton, who said everything moves in a straight line unless affected by something else. And we know that not to be true. But they built the entire two-dimensional plane, the Euclidean space that we live on, that we work on, that we try and define curved nature by two-dimensional space, and we never include the curvature. Everything has to have the balance.